Very honored to be here today. Now, I've timed it to fit probably within 8 minutes, so hopefully I can stick to the schedule. So I guess the topic of this stream is around the opportunities and challenges in global carbon neutrality transition. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can use blockchain trade platforms to support this. It might seem a bit far-fetched, but a key tool that we're working on is on Scope 3 emissions accounting, which is fundamental for instance, the mining and metal supply chains. Now, I apologize beforehand. This is not a sales pitch. It's just that I spent a lot of time working on particular platform, Minehub, our platform, so I'll use it as an example. I'll take a step back, and I guess what I'd like to state is that we have this incredible goal that China has set, given where you are and how important you are in how important China is in global supply chains to be carbon neutral by 2060. And this, like commitments from other countries, though, is going to be completely reliant on mining output. I mean, we see solar power needs copper. We see wind turbines need a lot of steel. Electric vehicles use a lot of copper. Batteries need nickel. So to meet the goals, mining capacity, for instance, of copper will need to increase ninefold by 2030, which will in turn create significant increases in energy-intensive smelting and refining capacity. To give you an example, for steel, 95% of the emissions contained in a rod of iron ore, rod of steel, come from the steel mill, not the mine. And if you then think that 8% of global emissions come from steel industry, it's quite sizable. And what this says is that given the importance for the energy transition of these metals, mining and metal supply chains really need to accelerate the decarbonization even more than others, and able to absorb the increase in production without making things worse. And there's obviously clear pressure to do so. We've seen that, and not just from the regulatory side, though. We see that buyers of, for instance, steel, they will increasingly demand lower carbon content or discount through pricing. Financiers, and I spend a lot of time in banks as well, they are increasingly setting emissions caps or offset requirements as part of credit or investment criteria. So more and more parties will demand and reward their customers, their suppliers, their borrowers, their investees to reduce their Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And why? Because the big lever and opportunity for net zero in mining and metal supply chains is in Scope 3 emissions accounting. You need to have that information at a detailed level to be able to start managing the portfolio, particularly Scope 3. But that requires a lot of data that's currently not there. Data from the value chain, from mine to market. And not just at a corporate level, but also at a product, a customer, a supplier, or even contract level to make the right decisions in the portfolio. And this is, the absence of the data is a challenge, but this is exactly where platforms like Minehub, and we are definitely not the only one, can step in and help. So a little bit about Minehub to give you this, the background. So it's an open blockchain-based platform, and it's really for digital trade. And you referred earlier, Mr. Fay, also to the supply chains and how important they are here. And we're focused on mining and metal supply chains. So we've designed and developed this with a wide range of market participants. We've got giant producers like BHP and Vale there, but also work closely with the teams at China Baowu. We work with financial institutions, small to medium enterprise and investment funds. And last December, the platform went live and is now being onboarded by a number of companies, large and small, across the globe. And our organization is to follow these supply chains, which, in a way now has become suddenly a lot easier with everybody adopting online tools. So, although we are a very small company, a young company, we're already globally present, and especially in China, where more than 50% of the raw materials that are mined are being processed. But let me explain a little bit more what Minehub, the platform, does from a functionality perspective. So there are many parties involved in physical commodity transactions. So this is the mining company, this is the steel mill or the copper smelter, it's the carrier, it's banks, it's ports, agents, etc. All those parties have a role to play. And what we do is, or Minehub does, is enables these parties to digitally integrate their operations based on shared information. Currently, they all need, each of these parties, they need to produce and store and communicate information related to the transactions. Now, at the moment, that information is still very much processed in a 17th century manner. It's copied with some new workarounds. It's copied and stored in inboxes, courier bags, WeChat messages, filing cabinets, and then it's copied again, transformed a little bit, and transmitted via multiple channels. And this process is not only very inefficient, it's full of errors, and is vulnerable to fraud. It's also expensive in terms of reconciliation. And the data that you would actually like to have, because it's high value for processing, is locked up in these inboxes and courier bags. So this is the bit where we're focusing on. So we allow parties to work together, or the platform allows parties to work together on the basis of shared data rather than copied data in real time. It's in one location as a single source of truth. And blockchain brings the trust to make sure that we've got an immutable, auditable record. We've proven this through quite a lot of pilots and trials. We're quite confident this makes supply chain transactions a lot more efficient, secure, and transparent. Now, that's all very nice, but what's it got to do with the topic of today? And I guess it is quite relevant, because if we look at what we're actually doing, we're selling products, but what if we add to the product specifications simply the emissions allocation to the product? And suddenly the platform does a lot more. It will collect the data the companies need on their visibility of their Scope 3 inventories in real time, automated as a business as usual activity. You see, we capture the fabric of supply chains. How much of what was sold, by whom, to when, and shipped from which source to which destination, who financed it. And if you break down that sentence, you can see that we're seeing the intensity is in the product, Scope 1 and 2, the allocation. We see how much, which is the absolute value, the absolute emissions of the transaction. We see seller A is upstream for Scope 3, for B is buyer B. Buyer B is downstream for seller A. And we have the source and destination, which gives us the emissions associated with transportation and distribution. So just by attaching this little value next to, for instance, iron content or the shape of the object that's being shipped, the commodity, a miner can provide to their customer not just the iron ore itself, but also the emissions content of that particular shipment. And maybe even attach a carbon certificate to the transaction so their customer can import a carbon neutral product. And this granular, audited visibility of Scope 3 will help users to accurately account for and manage their Scope 3 inventories. They can target and prioritize their efforts and their investments in decarbonization effectively and efficiently. So hopefully you can see the relevance there. Cross-border supply chain platforms like Minehub, they can be, I think, a key enabler for Chinese enterprise and government to help China and the world achieve its net zero goals. It's not a China problem, it's a global problem. And these supply chains, they cross boundaries, but they know no boundaries. So we were just starting, but we've designed Minehub to power these cross-border supply chains. Now, we would of course love to contribute to the Hainan Free Trade Port Program as a gateway for sustainable supply chains. So feel free to reach out to me or Lena with more information. Thank you.